ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, I am OmnusI, here in my lair. Thanks for joining me today as we go through another topic from RPGaDay, as was created by Autocratic for the uplifting of the gaming community and first sponsored on the RPG Brigade of Facebook. Today, the topic word that we have is forest. Yes, forest. This is the 6th day, the 6th of August. Forest is not something that is generally the most leading thing I can think of, but quite honestly, I'm fine with it. Again, I'm trying to turn everything to the creation of my game, which has been going on apace. I've done more work on it lately than I've done in a year and a half prior. And that was when I created and touched up the rules for my Traveling Hat Club, which is Dicefile 0.1. But forest, I think, is interesting because, in my mind, forest represents three major things. In any game, there's a forest. Number one, it's a wilderness place, meaning that the laws of civilization don't necessarily apply. You can't just go down the street and get something to eat if you've got some money in your pocket. No, in the forest, that isn't so convenient. If you want to eat, if you want shelter, you fight for it. A whole different set of skills comes into play when you're in the forest. So, it's important to have some skills so that you can survive if you're likely to find yourself in a forest. So it's going to be testing different skills, oftentimes skills that are handy for adventurers to have. So, that's one thing. Number two, it's dangerous. Now, I've been through my share of forests and woods. I practically was brought up in a forest. In the little town that I grew up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, I had miles and miles and miles of forests in all directions. And then when I was a young man, I loved walking through the woods by myself, imagining that I was there in fantasy battles and really let my mind stretch. Pick up a stick and it was a sword to me, and I was the hero who was doing, well, whatever adventures came to mind. Good times. But I am very aware that in the forest you have to kind of keep your wits about you. It's not necessarily just the skills thing, because you can walk back to civilization relatively easily, and that, you don't need skills to survive in a forest if you know what you're doing. But it can be dangerous. If you're, say, walking across the length of a fallen tree and you fall, you could break your ankle. All of a sudden, your situation becomes a lot more dire. Walking back on a broken ankle would be painful at the simplest and really bad on the worst. And when I was doing this, there weren't cell phones. So, yeah, that really would have been ugly. And also, the possibility of getting lost. If you are in a lot of places that count as forests in the United States, most of them are, a couple dozen acres on the outside, and, finding your way back to civilization isn't terribly difficult. But some forests are quite a bit bigger, and if you get into a strange patch, you can get lost to the point where you can be severely inconvenienced. Sometimes just walking in a single direction until you find a road and then circumscribing the entire forest to get back to the place where you started. I have done this. My wife and I one time, before we were husband and wife, I think, we went for a walk in a public park, and we went off the trail because I thought it was a trail, just not as well groomed, and it kind of disintegrated and we lost track of the trail, and I'm like, if we go in this direction, we'll probably get back to the parking lot. That wasn't right, and we went way off. I never claimed to be a Boy Scout. I was a Cub Scout for a little while, but didn't get into a lot of wilderness stuff. My wife, however, is a Girl Scout, and she should have known better than to listen to me. But anyhow, I digress. So there are levels of danger that you don't generally find in civilization. Now, yeah, in civilization, I'm not saying it's without danger, too. You could be robbed, you could be hit by a vehicle, there's all sorts of things, but most of them are accidental things like falls and spills. Forests seem to encourage that. You can easily twist your ankle stepping into a woodchuck hole or a snake hole. You could get stung by stinging insects, And at least one occasion, I came face to face with a mama bear. A baby was right there. That was a tense situation, so I don't mind telling you. It can happen. So in that way, forests represent something a little bit different. An element of danger and an element of a different world. And then the final aspect that I think of when I think of forests is I think of a place of healing solitude. I go off to the forest if I want to feel like I am truly alone for a little while. And I can feel nature all around me. I can look at the verticality of the trees and see how nature divides the landscape in front of me neatly. I can hear the animals around me, the drone of insects, occasionally the scampering of chipmunks and squirrels or raccoons. Sometimes a startled deer dashing off in the woods. And to me, that's healing. That's good for the soul. Whatever your own beliefs are and things like that, to me, it's a place to go for restoration. To get away from the artificial, even if you can't completely get rid of your tether, if that cell phone is still stapled to your butt, at least while it's silent, you can pretend for a bit that you're more like primitive man. And those concerns, those artificial stresses are at least put away for a little while. So how does this come to grips with gaming at all? Well, quite honestly, the forest is in its own way kind of analogous to a role-playing game for all of those three reasons. Number one, it's a different world, isn't it? It's a world of creation. It's a world where you can come up with an avatar who has powers and abilities far beyond your own and can make significant changes in the world that oftentimes you feel like you can't. It is a time when you obey a completely different set of rules because with the people around you, for a little while, what you say isn't taken as you saying it. So you can sometimes say and do things that normally you wouldn't, but you're in character and the others understand that you're in character and don't judge you because you flubbed a social role where you tried to do something and it just didn't work out. No, they just accept it. Okay, well, you didn't do so well this time. Maybe next time you'll be able to do a little better. You can have a character that lives a particular way that you normally don't. You could be experimenting or just, making something that feels different to you, and you're not criticized and condemned for it necessarily. So in that way, it's a different world when you step into the gaming sphere. And also, in its own way, gaming involves a completely different set of skills than what you would normally use in day-to-day life. It's a way of exercising knowledge of rules and substructures of behavior and interacting with the world that just isn't exactly like the real world. Where, sure, if you need to do a calculation, you whip out your cell phone and you do it. You don't know something, you whip out your cell phone and you Google it. You're hungry, you go and eat. You don't have to worry about making a skill roll or something like that. But you learn these artificial rules in these games, and it stretches your mind. It forces you to deal with abstracts and knowing how, rather than the common sense ways that we learn to get through our day, it teaches you how to think in terms of the rules of the game, which is abstract and makes your mind work a little bit more. As far as hobbies go, it's excellent for doing that. So, that's the one way. The second way that it's like a forest is that there's an element of danger. Now, I'm not talking about toxic groups. Lord, I hope not. I hope if you're ever in a group and you feel threatened, get out. Don't put yourself through it. There's no point where you should be at a gaming table and feel like you're in danger or that something bad might happen to you. That's dreadful, and don't do it. Games should not be like that. They should be about having fun and enjoying a particular, unique experience with other people. It should not be about actually exposing yourself to danger. But there is a danger in role-playing. There's a danger in caring. The danger is that you're going to form attachments to elements in the game. Maybe you're going to love your character. Maybe you're going to fall in love with an NPC. maybe you're going to discover things about the other players that might make you a little nervous afterwards, trying to reconcile those differences of, wow, you're always so quiet, but when you play a raging barbarian, you can get vicious and bloodthirsty, knowing that's an aspect of the person they keep bottled up, but it gets a little peak when you play. Sometimes, I've seen complete personality shifts as a person exercises the little used parts of their personality. And I love that about role-playing games, but sometimes, quite honestly, you should not play closet psychologist in a role-playing game. You don't want to always try to figure out the whys of how a person is playing a particular way. And you certainly hope other people don't look at you the same way. So I always feel like I can play my Galhard with extreme vitality and brutality, and nobody's going to think that I ever actually want to do any of the things that I've done with my barbarian. So, just as an example. But yet, again, if you are doing it right, you are going to be able to reconcile this with the part of having fun. So, I really do, when I play my characters, I root for them. I want them to do well because I know there's a little bit of me in all of them. And I generally make characters that I'm proud of and want to do well. They sometimes die. It's true. And oftentimes when they die, it hurts. Even in the most wide open game, you don't want to lose. That's one part of it. But really, that character dies, they may never come back again. That story is done. That door is closed. And in some games, there's no coming back. And it hurts to say goodbye to a character that you've fallen in love with. A lot of times it can feel like the game is over for you. Even if you can make up another character and rejoin the group, that can sometimes be a tragic situation if you've really fallen in love with a character. Now, some people don't. They generally put as much care into their concern as they would in a video game, where, yeah, in video games you can get emotionally attached to a character, but it's not the same as creating a character from the ground up and going through their struggles and living through their successes and failures. The attachment is just deeper because you've experienced it in a lot of ways. I've yet to find a video game that quite compares in that aspect, and I've played some pretty emotional ones. But the point is, when you play a game, there's a risk. Or if there's no risk, then the game is somewhat cheapened if you become aware that there's no risk. If a DM never lets your character die, for instance, that can actually force some separation for your character because their actions don't matter as much. But that is an element of risk that you run into forming a group, that something bad is going to happen to your character. And if it ever happens abusively, where it was just because of the fiat of the dungeon master or the game master and they just killed your character, that generates usually a certain amount of rancor towards the person who did it. It's just human nature. You don't want to see the character that you care about getting brutalized and possibly killed. So, and then the last part of that is probably the most obvious transition, the feeling of creative restoration. Being in a different environment, a different experience that is inherently restful and healing. You may have anxiety that comes because of the game. I can certainly talk from experience. I just, in my group, faced down a white dragon that I really did not want to fight. It was an uncertain challenge. I didn't know the risks as well as I thought I wanted to, and went into it with a pretty good feeling that we were going to end up badly. Not probably wiped out, but badly. And we performed better than I expected, but there was a certain amount of anxiety going into that fight. I don't mind telling you, I didn't want my character to die. I still don't want my character to die, but now he's cocky and arrogant because he killed a big dragon. So, there's that. But still, when I come to the table, I can unlock Rob, or OmnusI as the DM, and I can embrace the role of storyteller. All those other cares, the job, the car, everything, all the other problems, drift away for a little while, and I can concentrate on what these artificial challenges are in the game, which are so much easier to deal with than life's challenges. And I can cheer on my friends who are doing well, and I can encourage them if they're not quite doing as well, as sometimes happens. But it's a chance to really get out of the cares and concerns that wear you down day to day and refresh yourself. So even if I'm stressed out and exhausted, when I come to the table, there's a certain level of relief that I feel here. Here is where I am at my center, and I can reevaluate what am I, who am I, and in at least the context of the game, I have answers to that. Concrete answers, and I feel pretty good about those answers. So, to me, that's an analogy I'd like to make with Forest for RPGaDay. In many of the ways that I find goodness and challenge in the existence of forests and be able to separate myself from the civilized world for a little while, role-playing games offer many of the same advantages. Just, again, in different ways, in many cases stronger, because it's a shared experience with my friends. Or people who I hope to have as my friends by the time the game is over with. So, those of you out there who have your own games or want to have your own games, I strongly encourage you to take a trip out into the woods of role-playing for a little while and just try to leave those cares and concerns behind and open yourself up to new experiences and relax a little bit. And pick up a game, learn it to the point where it's not stressful, and just enjoy trying to play with friends. So that's what I hope for all of you. I know some of you have experiences where it's not so simple. Don't give up. Try to find a group. Ask people. Talk to people. You'd be surprised how many people are into gaming these days. Sometimes they'll wear a gaming t-shirt, or maybe they'll wear a hat with a pin in it showing a 20-sided die, like I frequently do. Yeah, feel free to strike up a conversation, and who knows what connections you might form. So, good luck out in the wilderness of role-playing. There are twists and turns, but generally, it's almost always a good thing. Thank you very much. Appreciate all of you, and I hope that you are enjoying the RPGaDay 2020. And until tomorrow, when I hope I'll see you again, I am OmnusI, here once more in my lair. Thank you for joining me. Farewell.